G'day viewers. For the last 12 years, I've been running a kids sword fighting class at an independent high school in Sydney. We called it Smite Club. I didn't come up with that name, but it was a good name. And it's been highly successful and had well over 100 kids through it over the years, probably much more. Anyway, so due to reasons, Smite Club has sadly come to an end at the end of this year, at least for now. But I thought it might be a good opportunity to reflect a little bit on what I've learned about teaching sword fighting to kids over the last decade and more of doing so. Now, a lot of instructors I know kind of avoid teaching kids. They avoid kids' classes and don't let kids join their adult classes. But I think there's actually some really good reasons why we should be spending more time teaching kids. First of all, historically, people started learning swordsmanship when they were, sort of 12, 14, depending sort of on the time and place and culture, but around about that age. Now, we tend not to get people until they're sort of, in their mid-20s or mid-30s or mid-40s, which means that we're missing out on a decade or two of experience. And I don't think that we're ever really going to get people to the level of expertise that was capable of being reached historically until we start training people at the age they did historically. Okay, so somebody who starts training at 12 is going to have a decade's worth of experience over even the youngest of our average recruits when they sort of come in the early 20s. And that's bound to make a difference. So for that reason, I think that teaching kids would be is a good idea. There's also practical reasons for those of you out there who are trying to make a living teaching HEMA. Consider the simple economic fact that the vast majority of martial arts dojos and sports fencing clubs make their bread and butter from kids' classes. Okay, that's how they make a living. Teaching enthusiastic adults is obviously more rewarding in many ways, but if you actually want to make an income, honestly, kids' classes is where the money is. And so for that mere practical reason, again, and as HEMA becomes a bigger and more widely recognised and dare I say a more professional looking thing, there's going to be demand for it as well. And so if you really are serious about becoming a professional HEMA instructor, kids' classes are going to be an important part of your income mix. Now, over the years, I have attempted to teach the kids a variety of different weapons and systems, and some they take to much more naturally than others. It's just and they enjoy better than others. And so, after 12 years of trying all sorts of different things, my very, very strong conclusion is this: it is better to teach them something like broadsword than it is to teach them something like longsword. And by that, I mean any sort of single-handed sword system where you have a hilt around your hand. So any sort of military saber system would do just as well. Okay. For a start, the systems themselves tend to be simpler, more easily grasped, more natural, and more forgiving in terms of, there's a variety of different ways that you can perform techniques and they will work just fine. They also tend to be fairly forgiving in terms of the tools that you use. So you can do broadsword with a foam boffer or a single stick or a shinai or a steel sword, and it works pretty much the same way. It works just fine, just the way it's supposed to. None of that is true for longswords. Okay, you can't really do longsword with a foam boffer. It just doesn't work. um, you require a great deal more protective gear to do longsword with a reasonable substitute, whether it's a sort of a plastic sword or a modified shinai or whatever. Um, Broadswords and sabres and whatnot have an enclosed hilt around the hand, which is a major safety advantage in that the danger of breaking little hands is thoroughly removed by having that hilt. And that's an issue with longswords, no matter what you're using. Little fingers are very easily snapped, and so protecting them under a hilt is a very good idea. And quite frankly, the kids struggle with the physical movements and coordination involved in longsword, and they take to broadsword much more naturally. So start them with broadsword or sabre or something like that, and leave the longsword until they are good at that and can move on to adult classes. The other good thing about doing the broadsword in particular is that you can introduce second weapons, shields. The rule that we had at Smite Club was that if you made your own Taj, you could bring it and use it in melees. And so a lot of kids did and became very good at broadsword and Taj. So for many reasons, I thoroughly recommend you teaching them broadsword, not longsword. Now, all that said, I don't mean that you should in any way dumb it down in order to teach kids, okay? You can tell them the truth, the whole truth, in all its complexity. They may not be capable of putting that into physical action necessarily, but they certainly understand it. And they will come up with their own approximations that they can physically do without any intervention from you. So, you can tell them, the full sophistication of whatever art it is you are teaching them. Don't expect them to be able to do it, but they will understand and they will come up with their own version, and they will, over the years, gradually approach the fully correct version, if you like, as they grow into their growing gawky bodies and get better control of it. So they enjoy seeing the sophistication of what it is that we teach. They love grappling. We do regular classes on medieval dagger, for example, which they really enjoyed and immediately incorporated into their broadsword and longsword bouting. So, don't dumb down what you're teaching, but having a forgiving system is certainly an advantage. I would also share with you that discipline is really important. So as independent Westerners, we tend to look somewhat askance at the strict discipline that you find in traditional Asian martial arts schools, or even, frankly, classical fencing classes, okay? And when it's like a bunch of guys trying to figure something out together, of course, we don't need that formal discipline, and most schools I have visited over the years tend not to use it and tend not to be terribly strict on that. But it's vitally necessary if you want to retain control of a class of kids. And despite their pushing of boundaries, they expect it of you. They like it when you have control of the class and you can control the rowdy kids who are disruptive and get in the way of them learning what they're there to learn. However much it may not seem like that at the time. And I'm just putting this out there as an idea, but I strongly suspect that the formal discipline you find in traditional Asian martial arts schools and classical fencing schools developed not because you need it for the adults, but because you need it for the kids' classes. And it carries over to the adult classes, but I think it's there in order to keep kids under control. Now, I have an article that I've written sort of summing all this up, which I'll put the link to down there. And the final bit of the article is a bunch of melee games that we developed over the last many years. And that's my last little bit of advice is kids love melee. Okay, I used to divide the classes into thirds. I'd have first third formal instruction on a technique or principle or whatever it is. Second third of the class was single combat, dueling, working on, what they were there to learn. And last third of class was, if you like, the reward for good behaviour, and that was melee, so group combat. And they did this with boffers and ran around the hall doing all sorts of things. And we developed a whole series of different games and scenarios, all of which were tremendous fun. I might also point out that teaching kids is good for you as an instructor. It's good for your teaching ability. It forces you to really boil down the essentials of whatever art it is you're trying to teach it in order to convey the really essential skills and put aside all the fluff. And bouting kids is really good for your own fencing. Okay, they're really fast. They do unpredictable things, and utterly fearless. And so, sort of fighting a bunch of 15 or 16-year-olds with boffers is actually really good for your own reactions and fencing time. Yes, melees are good. I wish I could do more of them in adult classes, to be honest, because they are so good for your fencing. And it's because a lot of the arts that we use are essentially military battlefield arts that are meant to be done in, open skirmish at the very least. It gives you insights into your weapon system when you start doing it in that context and not just some sort of, one-on-one dueling type situation. So anyway, that is my insights into the teaching of HEMA to children, which overall I would say is a good thing to do, and there should be more of it. And to finish off with, to satisfy Tim, I am having a pint of Little Creatures Bright Ale. I'll finish that off. Bright Ale is, I think it might be pretty well an Australian thing. It's, as you can say, a very clear filtered beer. It doesn't have any sort of head on it at all. And it is what it says on the label. It is crisp and refreshing. The bubbles just bubble through your head. It bursts on your tongue. I first had this on a horrible 39-degree day in Fremantle. We'd been wandering around doing touristy things all day, and we ended up at the Little Creatures Brewery and had one of these, and it's the first time I'd ever tasted this particular beer, and goodness me, it was just like heaven in a glass. So, Little Creatures Bright Ale, awesome stuff. Basically my quaffing beer during summer because it is so damn refreshing on a hot, sticky afternoon like tonight. So, thanks for watching.